Hi, good morning and assalamu alaikum to everyone. Welcome to our first webinar from Brighton International School. I hope you're all having a very great Saturday. Today we are here to join us on our webinar entitled Teaching Approaches During the Pandemic, in which we will be discussing the challenges as an educator that we faced and also about the approach, how we adapted to it. Okay, before we start, I'm going to introduce our guest speakers today. We have today Mr. Ibrahim and Ms. Isabelle from secondary level and Ms. Tasneem from primary level. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, so my name is Mr. Ibrahim. I teach ICT in the primary and secondary level as well.
My name is Ms. Isabelle. I teach French and English as a first language in secondary school.
My name is Tasneem and I teach lower grade. I teach multiple subjects: English, science, math, not math, art, ICT, so yeah.
And I am Ms. Maftuna. I teach first language English to grade 10 and 11. So we're all teachers from Brighton International School. And today we will be discussing, like I said, discussing the challenges that we faced as an educator in this very difficult time, right? The COVID time. Okay, before we jump into the discussion, I would like to briefly go through the COVID-19 situation in Malaysia. I think the first positive case of COVID-19 in Malaysia was reported in early February, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Something like that.
And then the country went on a whole total lockdown on 18th of March, and that's when everything started to change.
Yeah.
Yes. And after a few weeks into the lockdown, we started teaching online. And of course, with teaching online, all those challenges that started to appear, they started to emerge. Okay, when we first started, what were the main challenges that you faced going from face-to-face classroom to virtual classroom? Ms. Isabelle, let's start with you.
So I think we all had personal challenges going on at the same time, of course, and finding ways to teach in spite of everything. I think the first one was obviously technology. I think most of us are not necessarily equipped to teach, or at least we weren't then. So whether it was the right software, the right gadgets, camera, microphones, access to internet. And then, of course, there's the content. That's what we do in the classroom. I think we can all agree that we became teachers to be teaching live in a classroom,
not this
with
kind
people,
of live, but
not online necessarily.
Yes.
Maybe we would not have signed up for that. I'm not sure. So we thrive to have interactions with our students, and we when we're in the classroom, we would normally be able to assess their progress, to monitor their progress, to reassure them with a little tap on the back or a word of encouragement. We could see as they're writing or as they're doing something that they're doing it correctly or not, or whether they're just getting lost. Their body language was also tell us what's going on. Obviously, in the online classroom, some children don't have web cameras or their microphones are not working very well.
If they're actually there or not.
Sometimes we don't know, and we just see their head. So it's a little bit more challenging for sure to pick up clues, or at least it was at the beginning, to pick up clues on how they are and how they feel about a certain subject or a certain concept.
Ms. Isabelle, you mentioned you teach both French and English. So how were the challenges in both subjects? Like, did you face similar challenges, or were they different from one another?
I think they were slightly different in that in French, most of the students are fairly novice. They're fairly beginners, not exactly, but so beginners to intermediate. So usually in a live classroom, we would do a lot of manipulation, a lot of interaction, a lot of speaking, which would include board games, or them running to the end of the corridor to find information and coming back and relating it to another thing, to another student. So obviously this cannot be done exactly like this in a physical classroom. We'll look later, I think, how we can do it in the online classroom. For English, because it's grade 7 and 8, they have to do a lot of reading comprehension. So they have to read from a book, which in the classroom would be fairly interactive. When we start reading online a long text, everybody drops their focus for sure. And then answering questions with vocabulary that can be challenging, with structures that can be challenging. So again, those have been
the differences in challenges both
the difficult,
even though they're the same level, same secondary level students. How about in primary, like Ms. Tasneem, how was your challenges, or how different was it compared to Ms. Isabelle?
Oh, it's definitely different, but there are some similarities for sure. For primary level, we have to understand that the kids want to be active. You know, they like to run around. They like to run to their neighbors, their neighbor's desk and be like, "Oh, what's your answer?" Or, "Oh, this is my answer. Can you show me?" So it was very difficult. You can see as a teacher for them to be sitting online throughout the whole day, just paying attention to the class, and their attention span, once again, is not 100% always going to be there. So there are different ways, as we mentioned, we will talk about that later. But just to get them to focus, just to get them to understand the system of how online classes are, just to bring their attention back to the lesson, that was definitely one of the challenges, because we need to understand not all students are at the same level. You have some students who are computer savvy. You have some students who this is the first time they're using a computer, so they, you know, or a tablet or whatever devices now that they have, and they're like, there's an icon, teacher, that keeps popping up. What do I do? But I can't see your presentation. So you kind of have to like be patient and guide them and work through that. And definitely, you can also notice that you have siblings in different levels. So all of them are in the same house, and everyone has to try to figure out which corner or which room they have to sit in. So that you could see that that was one of the other challenges. Yes.
How about in terms of subjects? Because you said you teach like various of subjects. So like which one of them was the most challenging?
I would actually say language. Yes. Language for the reason that Miss Isabella has mentioned, it's reading. So I had to always get creative, because with kids, I know for a fact when one student is reading, the other student is walking around the house, and we actually do have parents who tell us, "Oh, I'm very sorry, my son just took a walk for a while, just to stretch his legs." So we have to, like, you know, try to be more understanding towards them, and not necessarily always be strict and stern with them, but more like, okay, you know what, students, at the end of the story, there's a catch. So if you wait till the end of the story, then you're going to know what the catch is, and you would have probably got the stars or the card points, or keep them in suspense.
Since I teach English as well, another I could relate to Miss Isabel's point about reading part, like. In normal class, okay, I would give one paragraph to this student, the other one next. I tried to do that in online as well. When that student finished the first paragraph, maybe it's lagging for me, so I'm like, okay, next, continue. But then the student is already continuing with the second paragraph, and then he doesn't even hear that I said, okay, never mind. So let him continue, let him read. So that's another.
Sure, the focus for students is very. I mean, I think even for us as adults, it's very hard to follow somebody reading online for some reason. It's not as lively as it is in the classroom.
And then there's always that one student that will be like, "Teacher, I want to read. Teacher, I want to volunteer. I will do that."
Yes, definitely.
Every time.
Every time, yes. Mr. Ibrahim, how about in ICT? Like, since you teach ICT, how were your challenges in terms of your subject?
So for ICT, we'd assume, you know, everything went digital, so it'd be a lot more easier. However, that is not the case for certain reasons, such as not everyone has the same computer. Someone has a laptop, they have tablets, or they use their own smartphone. So I have to cater for each of these devices, especially if they're using different operating systems or they don't support the software that I run in the class, for instance. So that was like a huge challenge, especially teaching ICT and trying to stay on the syllabus. So there were like things that we did like to get through that. We'll talk about that later. And the other challenge was we tried to make it fair for all the students and try to like ensure that everyone is going to get graded based on what they have. So that was also challenging to make sure that they all have a fair grading systems, especially like knowing this student might not have the capability or the technology or the internet even to connect to the classroom, something like that. So those were like some of the challenges in ICT, like software and stuff like that.
Different devices.
Yeah, different devices that we're using. So luckily, we're using Google Classroom. This is like our main thing in online right now, currently for the time being. All teachers are familiar with that. In the beginning, it was a bit tough, from Corona. Suddenly everyone had to go online, right?
Yes.
So there was a lot of like learning gap for teachers as well to get familiar with what we're doing.
You're not
and
looking
everything.
at me when you're saying that.
So
We
like
need to up our game.
Yeah. And then all the videos that were created during that, it was fun as like creating video and content for teachers as well to learn from. So we had that as a challenge as well. Making sure all of us are familiar with the system, Google Classroom. And we also have like Fedina, which is how we connect with the parents if we have anything. So this one was already like established even before the Corona period, where parents would talk with the teachers directly through the messaging system if there's any updates or anything like that. And we also have our WhatsApp group, the CCD, which directly links the parents with the teachers to set up appointments and stuff like that.
And the good thing about Google Classroom is that they have all these options as Google Docs, Google Slides, and whatnot.
All these
So
extensions.
all these extensions.
So this actually really helps students, especially like I mentioned, they might not have certain software that they need. So when using Google Docs, Google Sheets, this is already free. Anyone can use them at any time. So that has helped a lot, so that students who don't have the privilege of having certain softwares can just use that and still stay in the same level as those who have the softwares mentioned as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, how about in terms of engagement from students? Okay, obviously during the face-to-face classes, there's a lot of engagement. The students are always like responding to you, talking to you, but how was it different in terms of online teaching? Did it change drastically or did it increase or decrease? Ms. Isabelle?
I think we all agree with teenagers. I think it might be a little bit different for smaller children, but the first period is always a little bit of a slow starter to the day. We have to gently wake ourselves up. I completely relate to that. So that can be a challenging first 20 minutes of the day, maybe, depending on what you have planned. So I think we have learned to maybe deal with that differently, whereas again in the live classroom you could sort of make them move around a bit and feel a little bit more lively. For sure, it's hard to monitor at times. I think, like I was saying, when you're in the physical classroom, you can see all of them. They're all sitting at a desk. It's not always the case at home. Some of them are I don't know if I can mention that. Some of them are making do with where they are. So I know one of them is using an ironing table as a table, which is very creative. Well done. So there's things like that. They're not necessarily. But anyway, apart from the anecdote, again the body language. We don't know if they have a camera. If they don't have a camera, we cannot even see them. But if they have a camera, we cannot always pick up very accurately whether they're just completely dreaming and being somewhere else, or whether they're thinking about what we're having to train ourselves in reading cues in a different way, as I think also.
And another case with secondary students, they're like very preserved. They're like very quiet most of the time. Taking the answer from them is like, you literally have to squeeze it out. So I hope that's not the case only in my class. It's the same with all of you.
It can be like this.
But then thankfully we have that chat box option where they can just type their answer, type their responses. And how about in primary? I know they're like
primary,
quite...
They're different. They're definitely different from secondary. Primary are just excited the minute they wake up. They just want to start. They want to see their friends. They want to start participating. Teacher, what page? What are we doing today? And then, of course, there are some students who come with their blankets, that they just woke up. But just the effort that they have, that they have their blanket on and they're participating, shows you as a teacher that they really do want to come and they do want to be here. And it would be that same student who, after like 10 or 15 minutes, would be the one who's always, I want to answer, teacher, my name, teacher, say me, teacher, say me. So I think that's where it's a little bit different from secondary, where all the students want to participate at the same time. So that
with
was
full energy.
With full energy, yes. So we had, yes, that was one of the challenges that we were having with the lower grade. Yeah.
How about in terms of assessing them? Obviously, teaching is hard, but assessing them should be double hard because you cannot keep an eye on them the whole time. So how did you, what kind of challenge did you face when you were trying to assess them, give them quiz, give them tests, Mr. Ibrahim?
Okay, so when assessing them, it could be challenging because, as mentioned, in classroom, you can see them, especially in ICT. You would walk around, look at their computers, see what they're doing, and based on that, you can tell whether this student is, learning, progressing, or needs help, for instance, or doesn't understand something. Then I can, do a one-to-one and show that student. And maybe if I see a lot of them having similar issues or problems, I can just have a discussion in the whole class, basically doing a demonstration of the problem. Once it's online, it's a little bit tough because you can't really see their computer screens unless you ask them personally, okay, you show me your screen. Unlike, in a classroom, you can see everyone's screen. So this would take time to assess the students as well, because you'd have to go individually, make sure they know what they're doing, they understand the topic. Some of them might be too shy to ask within the class. I don't know if you had that as well. They would ask after the class is over, when you're the only teacher there. Okay, teacher, I didn't understand that. Could you explain it again? So that was one of the things that was happening during the ICT class. Yeah, and other was, as I mentioned, I would have to go one by one asking them to basically share their screen in order for me to know whether they know what they're doing or not. So there are options in Google Meet, what we're using, in which you raise your hands when you know the answer for something like that. So that has helped with that challenge, basically. When someone has finished, let's say, an activity, I would ask them, okay, if you're done, make sure you put that so I can see your work, or else I wouldn't know if you have an issue or not. And as well as I would just randomly pick a student whom I might consider, or I know that they might not have good background in the subject, just so that I am,
being fair.
Yeah, being fair, and also making sure that they understand what's going on. Because, we have to understand as teachers, it's totally, it's a total game changer from classroom to online. So it's a whole different adaptability, and we'll probably discuss that later as well. Just, in regards to assessing the students, there are multiple ways. Some ways that we do it is we have them open their webcams, right? Make sure they're all there, not like an invisible shadow or something doing the work.
Or a fan from the ceiling.
On the top of the head.
But I think maybe language teachers can agree with me. Assessing in language lessons were not that challenging because we could give them comprehension with open-ended questions, and we could give them writing assessments where they had to write from their own creativity, right?
Yes.
So I think in terms of that language classes, we had a bit of a advantage, because we could actually, even though maybe they were not really there to see how they're doing, but we can still assess that they're doing it from their own, right?
Yes,
was it the same in primary?
Yeah, definitely. For primary, for the language, it was the challenge in the English language is just the writing part. So that was a challenge. So most of our classes would be more about oral, verbal presentation, multiple choice, short answers. So it wasn't necessarily writing. So that was the challenge, where there would be one class within the week where we had to assess their writing during the class. So the ways that I would do it, I would be creative, where I would have fill in the blanks, because I know that some students, as Mr. Ibrahim was saying, that you as a teacher, you can spot which student needs more help, which student understands, which student needs that extra push, which student needs to be attracted to the class. So you kind of have to be creative. to basically pay attention to all of the students, equally, have that balance in the class. Yeah, so I think that in that sense, that's how I would handle my class. So I would change it up. Short questions, multiple choice, projects,
variation
presentation.
of,
yes, a different type of variation. And one thing that we do have actually in the lower primary is that we have continuous assessments. So just not to scare the kids and be like, you have a test or an exam. It's more of like how they were progressing throughout, you know, the week, every day, every term, you know. So their participation is very important. I think it's much more important than in secondary. We need them to participate. We need them to verbalize their answers. We need them to express their ideas, no matter how the language is. Is it weak? Is it not weak? Just them trying itself makes you know as a teacher that
they're making any progress.
There is progress.
Okay, now we already discussed the challenges, and now we're going to continue with how did we as teachers adapt to that challenges? How did we overcome those? How did we come up with solutions for those challenges? Okay, let's start with Ms. Tasneem this time.
All right, so with challenges, of course, you have to find a solution. So for lower grade, as I've mentioned, they are very active. Their attention span is very short. So we always have to find a way where we can grab their attention in the class. So some teachers are very creative. They use flashcards. Some teachers use extensions. So we have the paint extension. We also have the whiteboard jam. And what that does is it helps the students interact so they can have the control over what to write, what to draw. So you can have like different types of interactions from different students in that sense where, okay, I'm going to divide you into groups. Group A, choose a team leader. Group B, choose a team leader. And that team leader will be the one to write down the answer, help each other with the spelling, help each other. That's how so students get excited when there are things like that. But when it's just a monotone class where it's like, questions, answers, they lose interest. And what's important with the lower grade is you need them to be interested in the class because that's how they progress. Because we all know that in the class, majority of the explanations are done there, details are given, how to do a classwork, how to, example, understand what tenses are. That's all
done in the class.
Yes, during the class. And then as well with younger kids, I like to introduce videos and clips. So I'd be like, pay attention, there's a video coming up and there's going to be 5 questions. So whoever gets, you know, whoever gets all of them correct, you'll have star points and they get excited about things like that. So you have to put, you know, make them feel like there's going to be something, you know, that they can be proud of. So, oh, you're the winner, or just for them to have a little bit of that competitiveness between them. So yeah, visual representation is also something that I do use in my class. So sometimes I have classes where I'm like, okay, example, we have living things. Can you look around your space, whether you're in the living room, whether you're in, I have students who sit in the balcony. I have students who sit in the garden during their classes. And I'm like, tell me what living things you see around them. So they get excited and they walk around. And so it gives them excitement that, oh my God, I'm coming to science class. And I do the same with all of my classes, English, social, computer, and yeah, so it's always about visual representation. They are attracted to like the visual aspects.
Aspects when you merge the online lesson with their surroundings, so they get like, okay, they can relate more.
They can relate more, definitely, most definitely.
How about Mrs. Isabelle? How did you adapt to this new normal life?
I think certainly for French, it's finding activities that will be engaging and interactive, where the students will be doing the speaking, not me. And thanks to the wonders of internet and wonders of wonderful teachers out there in the world who have created tools, extensions, games, templates that you can use and so forth. So I've got a few favorites at the moment, and I'm sure those students have got a few favorites that have played Kahoot. I think that goes without saying.
They definitely love it.
And that's something that we would not normally do in a physical classroom because we don't bring a device to school. So actually that's one of the positive about that. There's another few, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention them, where basically I can have audio flashcards and that generates a lot of games that they can do by themselves or we can do in the classroom. What else do we use? Plenty of interactive actions like that. There's some where whether we use a Jamboard and then devise their own sentences, and then we play games around those. The same way, actually, that one is quite similar to what we would do in a normal classroom. And then for English, it's been a bit more challenging, I think, to try to keep it creative. But I think it's more about maybe the rhythm of it, maybe the time that's allowed for each activity, because even though they're all the children, they're all the students, I completely understand that their attention span might be not as long when it's an online activity.
And also when you find a good platform to conduct any activity, after a few times they get bored.
Totally.
So you have to find another one. You have to keep finding
the first
new
time
ones.
you use it, everybody seems very enthusiastic. The second time, third time, and then that's it. You need to change. Yes.
Then you have
before that. Yes, absolutely. And maybe reintroduce it later with a different with a different spin on it, or with a different way.
Yes, definitely.
But yeah, it's just finding, trying to recreate what works in the physical classroom and adapt it to the online classroom. I think that's the challenges and the solutions at the same time, because that's how we
adapt.
We managed to find a solution.
How about in terms of ICT? Like, where did you have a lot to adapt, or was it like already, because in ICT you already use like devices and everything?
Yeah, so in ICT, it's very easy to like adapt from classroom to technology, because everyone is already using the technology in the first place, right? So, but there is like a huge difference between teaching online and teaching offline. So when you're teaching online, you have to make it creative. Every teacher has to try and find a way to make the class more interactive, more creative, because you're no longer there looking at every student. You're looking at multiple screens, whether they have their webcams on or mics off or something like that. So for ICT specifically, we use a lot of different ways or devices, but we're still using the same syllabus, obviously. So if we're gonna do like writing, for instance, writing a letter, writing a document, instead of using what we do in the classroom, we have Google Docs, for instance, which is similar, for all students, and it's accessible for everyone.
Yes.
And also like for certain grades, we're doing like some programming. Obviously, they don't have that installed in their computer. It's only in school. However, the good thing about it is you can do it online. Everything has become easy for like teachers, especially during this, pandemic. Everything, like even the authors have tried to help teachers as well by publishing things online. A lot of resources are available. So, and then, as teachers, we also help one another. Like, okay, did you try that software? Like that is really good. We should try it in your class and stuff like that. So like, and even like developers themselves, like for instance, the developer of Google Meet, they already understand how teachers are during this, so they added more features, like the raising hand feature, background, exactly, the background. So when the students saw that, they were playing with it. They loved it. That was like
changing it a couple of times.
Not just the students. We all know that.
Even teachers.
Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged.
So like there's a creative way of teaching when you see something different. The students come in, they don't just see the teacher's face just like that and then sharing the screen. They see like, oh, something nice, something that they can go to their parents and be like, teacher, did you know today's teacher was in space? Or in the forest, in the Amazon, or something like that.
Our lesson took place in the forest today.
and that also, like, as teachers as well, that also creates, correct me if I'm wrong, for like languages, that can create a really good vibrant environment,
definitely,
right?
Definitely. Yes, I do actually implement when the students were the ones who told me about the background. So I didn't know about it in the beginning, but they were like, teacher, we could change our background. So I have a science, one of my subjects is light and darkness. So I used to ask them, what source of light can you see on your background? And everyone went to their screen and started changing their backgrounds because they all wanted to be asked, a question. So that's how it attracted them as well to just participate. If someone was getting a little bit tired, they woke up and they're excited, and
that is true. Yeah,
it definitely helps.
And it's like although, you know, the visual backgrounds are nice, sometimes students do misuse it. So as teachers, we're always like, okay, you can only change once. That's it. Do not change anymore.
And that applies to teachers as well.
Indeed. So
Okay,
yeah, that was most of like the part for ICT, basically, just, you know, the software adaptability between students, you know, how it's online now. And it's actually fun because students are much more like interested to show you what they have made in ICT. You know, like we all have like certain students that just want to always answer for everything. But even those who are a bit shy sometimes, they're like, teacher, what do you think of this? Is it nice? You know, so they also start participating a little bit more than they would in like a classroom setting, because I think they feel like none of their friends are around them to like distract them. You know, like so they're like just themselves and the computers and you in the other side of the screen.
And I remember in term 3 last year, you obviously taught some animation. I think it was Adobe Animation or something, and some students who used it for a presentation in French.
Okay, yeah.
So it was they implemented the cross curricular. It was very nice, obviously spontaneously.
Okay, and in terms of language, I think online teaching, another privilege was that, you know, we could take them to different places. Maybe it works with like science as well. Like even though they're sitting in one place, we could bring them to different, maybe like you say, space or like different countries, you know, like especially when we're talking about descriptive language, descriptive writing. And then I'll be like, okay, look at this picture. Like imagine you're there. Like, what do you see? Describe your surrounding and all that. So I think that was one privilege as well for English language subjects. Okay, now how about teaching materials? Obviously, before this corona, the pandemic started, all of our materials, they were accustomed to teaching face-to-face in a classroom, like to be implemented in a classroom environment. How did you have a lot of challenges changing it to online? Like, did it take a lot of time? Did you to, you know, change your lesson plans, teaching materials into online virtual class?
I would say not so much, actually. I don't think that's been the most challenging thing. In English, at Brighton, they follow a textbook and a workbook. So this is always the source of whatever we learn. So they all have that at home, or at least most of the time had it. So we can always refer back to that without having to devise more. In the physical classroom, we always create additional materials that would be projected anyway. So for me, it hasn't changed as much, I would say. And for French, apart from what I've mentioned before, the nature of the games or the format of the games may have changed. So that has created a little bit more of work, but actually not hugely, I would say. The supports are not where I find I spend most of my time. It's more about how I'm going to deliver something, I think.
Yeah,
how about
agree.
ICT and the primary? Like,
so for like ICT, you know, it's much easier, you know, going from online to offline. The only thing was like finding the software for students. So that was where I spent some of my time, you know, like researching for students who might not have specific software, what they can use as an alternative. As well as, you know, like obviously when they're in school, they can submit in the classroom. If they have books for other subjects, maybe they submit that book. So right now they have to use certain softwares in order to submit homework or classwork or something like that. Some of them don't have the device, obviously. So we have to be flexible with the students who don't. And, you know, we have to sympathize with what they have, what they don't have. Because like one student might have good computer, they can do their work and everything. Another student might just have a mobile phone. So they're going to take a lot longer than someone with a computer. So as teachers, you know, that also comes to play as well.
And internet speed plays a big role as well. They'll be like, teacher, mine is loading, please wait. Especially when they're submitting homework or something. And also, again, I think you mentioned earlier about like not every student has the same technology knowledge, like they don't really know all the buttons. So we all have one or two students in the class like, teacher, how do I submit? How do I do that? So that also kind of slows down the lesson a little bit. So because we have to get back to them so that they, like they catch up with the rest of the class, right?
Yeah, definitely. For lower grade, I think it's like a balance. It's like an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time. The advantage is now all the parents know exactly when they have to submit, what classwork they had, because for the lesson plans, I think all the teachers, what we have to do is for each and every lesson, we actually describe what we are doing for each and every class. So it's easy for the parents to actually know, okay, they did this page, they did this subtopic, they did this chapter, and they did this exercise from the workbook. So it's very easy for the parents to follow up, whereas in the physical classroom, the students themselves would have to go to their parents and be like, we did this and we did this. And sometimes students being students, or younger kids being younger kids, they might misunderstand. So if I were to say in the classroom, everyone do page number 14, you have students who do page number 40. And they're like, oh my God, we didn't even go to that chapter yet. So that has helped, I think, for lower grade. And also the system where we upload the classwork and we upload the homework, we have the points or the marks already. It's already automatic over there. So you mark, you correct it on the spot, and then you give them the marks. So, and you write a comment to the parent, okay, your student did well, your student had spelling mistake, I mean, your child had spelling mistake. So I think that for some reason that was an advantage. That was definitely a positive, I feel.
Okay. So we have been in this pandemic for quite long, let's say. It's been like going on for forever. But then for the future, we don't know how long it's going to last. So as a teacher, as an educator, are you prepared for if we have to continue with online lessons for I don't know how long? So are you prepared spiritually and physically, mentally?
I think I can speak for all of us. I think at this point, we've figured it out. We know what we're doing. We've gone creative. We've had teachers who've shared with us different types of outlets and sources and extensions and ideas of how to tackle classes. And the nice thing about the school setting that we have here is all the teachers are very, they love to share their ideas. They love to give their ideas. They love to educate you as sometimes
create videos.
Create videos, yes, create videos, exactly.
Thank you, Mr.
You're welcome.
So had to be acknowledged.
I think I would say that we definitely
whenever there's one teacher comes out with this, oh, you know what? Maybe you can implement this to your lesson as well. You know, that's a good thing.
And then you get excited and you're like, oh, they're gonna love this. They're all gonna participate. So yeah, they enjoy it. Definitely.
But let's hope that we go back to the physical classroom.
Hopefully, yes. Soon. All teachers, I think we prefer the physical face-to-face rather than online. Okay, so far we discussed the challenges as an educator we faced and how did we overcome those challenges. But now, obviously, this pandemic has been quite challenging for both teachers and students. But now let's talk about the role of parents in this during this pandemic in terms of education. Obviously, their role, I think, doubled or tripled with this online learning because they have to be there assisting their children. Like, are they following up? Are they doing it right? So how was your experience with that, like in terms of parents' cooperation in your lesson, in your teaching? This is about.
No doubt, it's a collaboration, right, between parents and educators. It always has to be at the best of times. And this is not right now. As a mother of two teenagers myself, I know how difficult it can be to get them to have a healthy lifestyle, to go to bed early, to avoid screen time, to get up on time, to be motivated for school. So I think, obviously as parents, we have to make sure we provide a supportive environment and avoid confrontations whenever it's possible, but that's not necessarily easy. I think it also probably is, at Brighton we follow the Google Classroom format, so parents can receive an email weekly or daily, I'm not sure, where they're updated on what work has been turned in, what work hasn't, what marks. So I guess they can have a conversation with their child then and hopefully encourage them.
And also we have the department that we can refer, as a teacher, we notify them and they will notify
the communications
parents.
department.
Yes.
Also. So there's like a, you know, teachers can contact parents, parents can contact teachers. So to ensure that we have a dialogue that students can thrive, hopefully, in spite of circumstances that they might face. I think there's another thing as well that might be difficult. I know parents are working.
Yes.
During the first lockdown, they might have been working from home. Now they're probably going out to work, so that could be challenging. They can't be present. I think the student, especially in secondary school, I think they have to be accountable also. They have to have a sense of ownership about what they do.
Yes.
I don't think it's the responsibility of the parents solely to make sure. But I think from the parents' point of view, and I know that's not always possible, but probably it's making sure that the students are in as quiet an environment as they can. And I know we can't all do that. We might all be in the living room with 3 or 4
where
people.
the Wi-Fi is the strongest.
Yeah.
So again,
Exactly,
if that's the case, maybe try to find some headphones. I think, you know, I bought some cheap ones at times, you know, just to find so they can isolate a little bit. They can be focus on what they have to do, because we follow the normal timetable. So for them, it's a normal day, even though they're at home, and mum can come and chat from time to time. But it's so I think it's creating a supportive and favorable learning environment, and trying to be there for their children.
So for secondary students, mostly we hope that they are they can self-assist. They don't really need much of their parents' help. But how about in primary? I hope that's not the case in primary.
Primary, we just, I think we would like to definitely, if we could give prizes to all the parents for their support and their collaboration with us as well, because as we all know, primary students are not very computer savvy necessarily, or you know, computer, I'm teaching grade 3 computer, so they still haven't gone to that part where you know how to attach a file, how to send. So it's still a process for them. But what I do realize is that yes, parents are busy, and parents definitely have their own schedule and their own thing that they have to do as well. So with primary classes, what we try to do is we try to focus more for the classwork and not the homework. So we focus more on classwork activities. So that's how we've changed or revived our lesson plans, to attract them to participate, to answer questions during the class, to do worksheets through the classwork, and to have less homework. So I'm not saying less homework means the number of homework decreases. That one definitely has to decrease from physical classes, but the number of questions maybe during the homework. So you would try your best to associate it to what you were taught in that particular class. So example, we are learning in social studies about the Malaysian flag. So the homework could be something like, draw for me the Malaysian flag and color it. Something that's simple, something you know that they would understand, and you know that they have already understood during the class. So not something that's complicated. Leave the complicated for the classwork, where they can understand it more, where you can have a discussion about it.
So they can ask you directly, okay, how do I do this part?
Exactly. So we try to really help parents in the sense where we try to do most of the work in the classwork. And the homework is just a submission. I have students sometimes where they would be paying attention to the class and doing the homework at the same time. This is definitely discouraged, but this is what I just wanted to mention, because it's that easy. It's that easy. You pay attention in the class, you participate in the class, for sure you will know how to do the homework. It's not complicated, So that's how we try to help the parents, from that part, from that aspect.
How about Mr. Ibrahim? You teach both primary and secondary. How was your experience with the parents?
All right. So for parents, you know, this pandemic basically did affect everyone, even teachers as well, especially teachers with family, because they have to teach, and at the same time, you know, their daughter or son would also have class somewhere, and they might also need help, right? So, you know, as a parent, I would assume that the beginning was always going to be the tough part, you know, adapting to something new. You know, like it's going to be a completely new norm for them, telling their children, okay, you need to do this, you need to go access that. Thankfully, we have like a really strong team. Guidelines were sent to the parents, video tutorials as well. And we also have really beautiful support team that is always ready to answer whenever the parents are in need or have technical difficulties with that. So like mentioned previously by Ms. Tasneem, Ms. Isabelle, that, like you would have, especially parents with many children or, a huge family, you would have some technicalities where not always you're going to see the student in the class due to either a very weak signal because everyone is sharing or something similar to that. So I think we, all of us can agree that those situations, the parents do inform us. And based on that, we try and, adapt to that student or like extend some time for them to complete a work or something like that. And then the difference between, doing homework when you're in school and doing homework when you're in an online environment is completely different. This is why, like, we try and make it easy for parents as well to know what's going on by having a description of what we're doing in the class, as Ms. Tasneem mentioned earlier, where it's like, a manual for today's class. Yes. We're going to do this. We're going to look at this chapter. The homework is going to be this, and the due date is by this. So the parents can look at it
and have an overview.
Yeah, they'll have an overview of what happened in the class. And the students can also tell them, okay, mom, dad, I did this, and this is what I'm expected to do. If they don't have that, technical capabilities or they're not very computer savvy, the parents can then help them. So, like one way that we try to help parents is to extend deadlines, especially we try and avoid making submissions on the same day, regardless of the grade, like whether it's, primary or secondary. We try and make it like at least one day. So parents also have, they can give their children the computer to use, because I'm sure a lot of parents want to discourage their children from using the computer 24/7. Yeah, so they give them like certain times that they can use the computers. So this is how we're like trying to help encourage them by extending the due date, for instance, by a day, so that students are able to answer or submit. And if parents have any inquiries, they can always message our corporate communication department. They're always willing to accept, inquiries from parents and also set appointments with teachers. We've had a lot of appointments with teachers where the parents would meet in the Google Meet itself and would ask their questions, and based on the subject, the teacher would, answer them. Basically, it's been very successful, I would say.
With this pandemic, not only the teaching moved to online, but our meetings as well, they moved to online. So I think we all agree that the role of parents has multiplied by double, tripled during this pandemic. And they have been giving a very immense support to all the teachers and making our jobs as a teacher like much easier by helping the students on the other side. So I think it's our duty to acknowledge that.
Yes, it is.
Okay, but as an educator now, what do we expect from the parents in the coming months in case this online learning has to extend? So what are your expectations from them? How else would you want them to, assist you in your teaching and learning?
Hopefully they will, continue being supportive. We know it's not easy. This is a very troubling, year it has been, and hopefully that's not the case in the coming year. But we would wish their continued support, obviously, and maybe if they have feedbacks, they can always send it in our corporate communication department. And we can also try and implement, because it's like a learning process, not just for the teachers, for the parents and the students. So we can see some feedbacks. Based on that, we can try and incorporate it if we think that it's really good. And the channel is always open between teachers and parents.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Just keep that dialogue going.
Yeah, just keep the dialogue
message,
going.
Whether you think it's small or big. I don't think there's however small or however big. I think it's always important to make sure the channels of communication are open. Absolutely.
As well, in the future, there are plans to bring in learning management system (LMS) to try and simplify the process of the online the online process, basically, like adapting to it, especially if, you know, it might be the new norm. We never know. So if that's the new norm, we want to try and make it even simpler and easier for every party involved during this pandemic, basically.
And also in terms of helping their children in terms of like submitting their stuff, the work, assignment, homework. I think teachers, we also implemented this technique that we put the submission date next or night, so that when the parents come back from home, they can help the children.
Yes,
so
exactly.
we understand that you have maybe multiple children, maybe you are also working from home or working from your office. So we are trying to make it easier on you as well. So we acknowledge your help if you're any parents are watching us. Okay, so now we have a few questions from the viewers. So we will be answering them. First question is from Sheila Santaramohana. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. How do you differentiate your teaching for different learners? So obviously in one class we have different levels of students. So how do you differentiate your teaching approach according to that?
Maybe I could start. All right. So for the lower grade, we do actually understand that not all the students are on the same level, whether it is language or whether it's understanding. So as a lower grade teacher, you always have to differentiate that the minute they step into the classroom. So that's something that as a teacher, you do understand, all right, their speaking is at this level, their writing is at this level, their understanding is at this level. So what we try to do is we try to incorporate different types of elements and features to help them understand the same topic. So if, let's say, I were to ask an advanced student, could you explain to me the setting of a forest, example? So I would not ask the same question to a student at a different level. I would ask the student, if you were in a forest, what would you see? So you have to try to, manipulate your questions in such a way that your student is going to understand what you're saying. And then for sure, you also do have some students who are very, their vocabulary is not that advanced, and they're trying. You could see that they're trying, but you want them to participate in the class. So you have to also do or introduce pictures, maybe, or introduce flashcards, or introduce videos. So if I were to ask advanced question for the advanced students, I would introduce like much more visual for the ones who are still trying to pick up the language, still trying to understand the subject, still trying to understand what the topic is about. Drawing, that's something that I used to always use in the physical class, and I've started to use as well in the online classes, where I would ask them, okay, here's the whiteboard jam, this is you're in charge, draw for me the features of an insect or features of a different animal. So that's how they try to participate, all of them equally.
How about in second grade?
So I think it's obviously, like Ms Tasneem said, the same principles apply. The language used might be different. The level of the answer expected might be different. So it could be like a longer or shorter answer, more complex sentence or less complex sentence. It could also be that you have a criteria list that's very clear on what the top benchmark is, and what it includes, fully formed sentence, grammatical points, A, B, this, that, and the other. And then, it goes down. It's like a sliding scale for that with all the descriptors. That's usually something that makes it very clear for students, therefore, to know what they're aiming for. And you could also even suggest that, okay, you're going to do this. Where do you think you would fit in those descriptors? And they would make a prediction on that and say, okay, so this time you did achieve that or you didn't. Where would you go into the next benchmark? Like, what's the next step? How can you do this? So hopefully that's what we try to do. Then there's in terms of slightly different, but it's more in terms of their confidence levels and everything. I think we mentioned before that sometimes students are not very confident answering publicly, but they might be wanting to answer in the chat. And on the opposite side of the scale, it's a student who's writing maybe is not so confident, but might be willing to answer verbally. So I think there's all these other techniques. I think, again, it doesn't really change that much from the live classroom. It's just the support, the formats, the interactions are slightly different, but actually the principles are the same.
Yes. Yeah.
Anything to add on, Mr. Ibrahim?
Both the teachers mentioned like really great points. So like the only thing, like for instance, I do have some learners, for instance, who are at a higher level. They finish their work like you know, at a very good timing, basically. Like for instance, the lessons are like our lessons right now online. We're following the same lessons as we were offline. We haven't changed that. So the learners, you know, the advanced learners would try and finish their work earlier on by maybe 10 minutes or 5 minutes before that. And what I do typically in a classroom where I know that there's some students who might be like quite poor in the class, I would ask the learners to, you know, help them out, give them hints, not answer for them, just give them hints on how to do things. So ICT is very practical. It's very easy to learn for whether you're advanced or you're not that advanced. And I've seen that it has helped, especially those who are not really good, when their own classmates are encouraging them by giving them hints here and there, and as well as, you know, me explaining and demonstrating. And whenever they have a question, you know, I make sure that I focus on everyone equally, and I just give them special attention after, like within that last 5 minutes, if they need it, by asking them, okay, would you mind sharing your screen? Let's see where the code goes wrong. And then everyone would come and help, you know, try and help them out and stuff like that.
Okay, so to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so the next question is from Afnan Shafiq. So among all the challenges that you mentioned, what is the biggest one? What was the hardest one and that you had to overcome among all the challenges that you faced?
I think just the transfer, right, from offline to online.
I think,
so that took, like, we started this in the previous term, like in the middle of it, when everything just stopped there. And then we were like, okay, so how do we transfer from here to there? Because, you know, it's not like a one-day job where, okay, I'm going to use this and I'm going to use that and this. It took like a week. And thankfully, there was like, you know, a week given by the government so that everything stopped at that time. You know, like everyone was busy just looking for ways that we can use as teachers. And once that was done, I think after that, you know, after the first 2-3 weeks, everyone became like an expert in that, testing out things.
So the shifting part was the most
I think it's slightly different for me because I joined at the time where we were already in lockdown.
Okay,
so I was teaching students I'd never met. So it was quite interesting, yes. Apart from having to transition in terms of that technology, it was also teaching students and some were in Kenya, you know, not all our students were in Malaysia at the time, different time zones.
Still actually.
And still some of them are still, yes. And I'd never met, and it was a very odd experience, I would say.
I would say one of the biggest challenges was in the very beginning, but now it's not a challenge anymore because we have figured out a solution for it, was how to attract the younger kids to the class and not have them walk away or want to spread their legs and go downstairs and walk around the house. So that's something that we would see in the first 2-3 classes, where you would click on their screen and as mentioned, the webcam or the frame, it's the background or someone's head, and you would assume that they're paying attention, but actually they were like lying down. Or so that was one of the challenges in the beginning, to have the kids understand what online classes mean. The rules apply. You're in a classroom setting. Some students even used to come and wear their uniforms, which I really do appreciate.
We still have that even in secondary, right? So that is really, it shows like they're serious. They can taking it serious. Okay. I think my biggest challenge is quite similar to yours, like how to keep the students engaged throughout the online lesson. Because, at the beginning they join and then they say hi, and then once you start the lesson, it's the same thing, and then they lose interest. So keeping them interested throughout the whole 50 minutes was, I think, the hardest challenge that I had to overcome. Okay, last question. This is from Abqari. The longest question. Compared to how things were before the pandemic, how do you make sure the examinations are now carried out so that you make sure that students are not plagiarizing or cheating?
All right, so I think I can answer that. All right, so Yeah, first thing when we went online, we had this consideration. We had like a lot of meetings regarding this. Obviously, when you're online, students have a lot of temptations to cheat. Either they can, be with their friends here, they can call them, they can, use Google, search for the answers, and you would think they're doing their work. So some of the solutions that we have come across is using tools that are already made, such as Google Form, where the questions and answers shuffle.
Yes.
So it's not the same for each student, even though questions are there for everyone. It's just the numbering is changed. So if, let's say, Ms Tasneem and Ms Isabelle are going to cheat, her question one answer would be different.
Question two.
So they wouldn't be able to do that anymore. And also, like, there was another issue where, students would mute their mics, right? Or they would not have their webcams on. And, they would be in another group chat discussing the questions with one another. So another solution to that was that we actually had them turn on their webcams when they're doing assessments, as well as like throughout the classes, like regardless of the class, the webcam should be on. Sometimes their mic might need to be on depending on the examination or assessment. As well as the last thing was where we would have the webcam focus on the students. They do not touch the computer at all. They take a piece of paper and pen and just write. So we can see them writing, and they don't have a chance.
A bit further away so you can see the full.
Exactly. Yes. So once they're done writing, you can see if their lips are moving. So if their lips are moving, they're like discussing. So you can call them out. Okay, you, no talking. I can see you. And they would be like, oh, actually, I'm reading out. No, doing that, read it internally. So once they're done, they just take a picture and submit that online.
I think you have also a plagiarizing app that's
there is on the Google Classroom there is a plagiarizing app. I mean, it's also very easy to highlight it and stick it on a search engine. But I think it's finding more creative ways of, like, for English, having open-ended questions with about a text. You haven't found on a pre-done document somewhere that
it's
or
very
changing the
unlikely that you
wording.
have the exact same idea and the exact same structure with your friends.
Yes, definitely.
So yes, just being a bit more creative, I guess. And also maybe giving lots of opportunities to do mini quizzes, mini assessments, I know in English I often divide by doing maybe the first part of the assessment, if it's a little essay, will be their notes, then it will be the draft, and then it will be the final essay. So there will be feedback on it, but also you will award them points if they've done the steps.
Yes, definitely. So you give them a specific step to follow, so that you make sure that they didn't jump to the
and also
answer.
So it also gives them it gives them also a chance to validate their learning, in not just with the finished product, with the process
as well.
For lower grade, we don't really have problems with the plagiarizing, because the way that we set up our questions, for example, pop quizzes, for example, assessments, for tests, each and every student has different questions. And the questions have multiple choices, so they can only choose the choices that are available. That's one. The second thing is they have a time limit. So it's like one question, 1 minute. And they're not that, I wouldn't say, computer savvy to Google up the answer. And you can notice if one or two students were to ever do something like that, you can see the structure of the sentence is so advanced. It's something that you haven't even taught them in the class. Example, what is a volcano? And they're like, when the eruption. And these are not words that grade 3 use. So you kind of can't pick up on, no, don't Google the answer.
I think that applies for secondary students
as
well.
Absolutely.
So students, we know.
You know who you are.
I think that answered your questions. So thank you, teachers, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone who's watching us online. Before we end, there are a few announcements that I would like to make. Brighton International School is announcing their new launched A-levels program. Admission for admission from January 2021 is open, so do check them out. We will be conducting trial classes for primary and secondary level students on 12th and 19th December. So if you want to check out how Brighton teachers conduct their lessons, so you may join this trial classes, do register for that in the information shown in the banner below. Last, we still have a few slots available if you would like to give the students, your children, experience of how Brighton students, how teachers are conducting their lessons. So you can call us at 0342657962, or you can visit our website, brighton.edu.my. So that's all from us. Thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having
Thank
us.
you. Goodbye.